Sunday, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Cine-Files Live here on the Cine-Files YouTube channel. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, joined as always by my co-host, stunning Steve Morris. Steve, how are you feeling? How are you doing on this Sunday afternoon?
I'm good. It's hot here in Los Angeles, and I went out to the farmer's market today to buy some melons, and I neglected to bring my hat. And bald men, they got to wear a hat. So, but other than that, I'm doing good.
You were caught redheaded is what you're saying.
Yes, that is exactly. I don't know if I got too burnt, but it was need a hat.
Yeah. But we're here live today to have a fun conversation revisiting 1985's Pee Wee's Big Adventure, directed by Tim Burton, his directorial debut, by the way. And this was also the debut of Danny Elfman as a film composer. And we'll get into some of that. We'll talk about some of the movie. We'll talk about Paul Reubens' life and career a little bit, our thoughts on that, and also talk about the impact of this film. And if we think this thing still holds up, maybe our favorite parts, maybe the parts that don't hold up, and some of the influences of the film. And I've got some trivia and not trivia, but some facts about the movie, to toss in as we go along in this conversation. So thank you all so much for joining us. I will pin the Cine-Files Cine-Files Streamlabs address in the chat, but it is up there right above Steve and I's head in the middle if you want to send in any support for us through Streamlabs or SuperChats. And if you haven't subscribed to our Patreon, that's above my head right up there, patreon.com/the Cine-Files. Steve, you know, we've been doing a lot of new stuff on the Patreon, giving a lot of new benefits, and we've seen people taking advantage and moving up and jumping up and even becoming a part of our advisory board to help us dictate the direction of the podcast and the show as we go forward. It's been a good time.
It's you know what's funny about it is like you and I spent 4 months trying to figure out how we wanted to redo
Yes.
the Patreon and what I didn't expect, the goal was to really give back to the audience and to help out, to say thank you to the people that support us so much.
Yeah,
I didn't know how I was going to have so much more fun for me with the new setup of the Patreon. I mean, obviously the advisory board's the biggest thing just because that's a joy to meet with every month, but also because of the ad-free versions of the show and the combined versions of the show. There's so much more conversation going on Patreon now, and it's so great to feel. It makes me feel part of the Cine-Files community, and I know that's what it's doing for our patrons. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're having some great interactions, some great conversations, some fun back and forth. Of course, we should give love to Luke. Luke Leeson, who does our social media stuff. He's sparked a lot of conversation on the Twitter there, an X formerly known as Twitter, and on Facebook sometimes as well. So it's great stuff to have more and more interactions with you all, and we're seeing great responses from you all as patrons. So if you haven't joined the Patreon, trust me, it is well worth your time, well worth whatever you can do to support the show at patreon.com/the Cine-Files. All right, well, let's get into Pee Wee's Big Adventure. Steve, this has been the first time you've watched it in quite some time, if I remember correctly. So what are your thoughts initially about Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and when do you remember first watching it in your life?
So I have a very specific memory of watching it in the movie theater in San Rafael, not at the Rafael, which is the nice theater, but the other theater that's sort of on the other side of 101 Freeway. Okay. Same movie theater that I saw Revenge of the Nerds. It's so funny how certain movies you can just remember being in that theater. Yeah. I remember this. The biggest thing I remember, of course, is I think what arguably could be the greatest jump scare in the history of cinema, which is Large Marge. Because, and I guess we'll talk about it, but yes, I remember it so strongly from that. And then, I'll let you answer. How did you first come to it?
I'm sure I saw it in a movie theater in Dale City, where I grew up in Virginia with a bunch of friends, because I saw this trailer and I was like, oh, I've got to see this film. Something about this film is so weird and interesting and fun. And it's right around that sweet spot of being a teenager in high school at that time. And so I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's get a bunch of people together. And we went and saw it and had a really good time. And I just remember enjoying it. And it's always had like a special place in my heart. It's not a film I go back to and rewatch a lot, but it certainly left an impact. And of course, Paul Reubens' portrayal of Pee Wee Herman, bringing that character into our mainstream pop culture understanding, and a character that endured all the way up until his recent passing. So,
As far as how I reacted to it this time, it's true. I had not seen it in a really, really long time. And I'll let everyone in on a little behind the scenes moment of the Cine-Files, is that we had talked about that this was going to be our next regular episode.
Yes.
Of the show. And I was watching it and taking all of my copious notes and trying to write down everything that happens and everything that's said. And I'm typing along, and about 25 minutes in, I wasn't feeling it. I mean, it's not that I didn't like it, but I don't know that I care about going moment by moment through this movie.
Yeah.
It's funny, and I feel mixed about that now, because basically where I texted John and said, hey, what would you think about switching this to a live show, was right when Pee Wee starts to go on the adventure. So the end, and it's right when he heads off to look for the bike. And from that point forward, the movie got so much better for me. And just the whimsy and the silliness and each goofy little adventure on his Odyssey just got better and better. And so I'm really happy we're doing it as a live show, because I feel like it fits really well. But I also go, like, by the end, I was like, you know what? That was actually really fun. It was a really fun movie.
Yeah, I watched it yesterday afternoon, and it was a perfect film to watch on a Saturday afternoon, sitting on my recliner, legs up, and the air, both of my fans going on me, keeping me cool, and just, like, disappearing into a fun little film about a guy who is the best definition of the term man-child, in that he is adult enough to handle whatever's happening in his world, but he's very childish in how he approaches the world, because of all the things that are in his house and all the little functions. And, this is right around Back to the Future time. You could definitely see some connective tissues there. His suit that he's wearing, you could argue, is probably influenced by Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, which had been 1984, the year before this film. So there's a lot of, like, right at the right 1980s time for this film when you watch it now. And there's a very fun time throughout. The adventures work. They're not overdone. They don't feel shoved in. For me, for the most part, the Dottie stuff is what it is, and I can understand if people might have complaints about that. It's certainly a weird thing with great voiceover actress Elizabeth Daily, now E.G. Daily. But overall, I came away from it being like, this was just so much fun, and to remember how much joy he took in bringing this character to life. And what was great is he's not one of these people that turned on his character. You know what I'm saying? Even Shatner, who we revere so greatly, you with Enterprise Incidents, and both of us as Star Trek fans, at times, when he was getting frustrated with being attached to Captain Kirk, had some strong comments about it and feelings about it, but of course came around and certainly embraces the character now. But, like, Pee Wee or Paul Reubens never turned on Pee Wee Herman. He may have been frustrated by it, may have felt caged in by it, which may have been what led to what happened in the theater when he got arrested for that. But in the end, he's always spoken positively about Pee Wee Herman as a character. And watching it this time around, you can really feel the magic of this movie still. And it's funny, Steve, see the influences of what Tim Burton is going to do in his later films. You can see Batman Returns influences. You can see Beetlejuice influences. You can see a lot of that throughout this film when you watch it.
Well, I think that's one of the most interesting things is it's this pairing. I don't think we'd be talking about this movie today without Tim Burton. And I don't know that we'd be talking about Tim Burton without Pee Wee Herman, because it was such a, like, perfect beginning for his style. And I want to talk about this character of Pee Wee Herman, because I've been thinking about it.
Yeah.
Is, first of all, one of the big differences watching it this time was, instead of being a teenager when I first saw it, I'm a parent. And what hit so hard watching it, was just like, oh, Pee Wee Herman thinks like a child, exactly, with the jealousy and the totally unrealistic thinking and the silliness and the self-aggrandizement and the ego, and also the sort of just crazy belief that things are going to work out. It's like it is a child's fantasy of this adult character living. It's an adult character living a child's fantasy life, and it's not like Pee Wee is just a nice guy. Pee Wee is not a nice guy. Like, Pee Wee is, we like him, but I was thinking too, like, we did Modern Times years ago. The Tramp, he is not actually just a nice guy.
No, he's
the
a very
Tramp
guy.
He's got some evil in him. And when we did, I know you're not the fan that I am, but well, we did Police Story, and you look at Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan is not a nice guy. Jackie Chan is jealous and selfish and all, and needs to have his comeuppance. And it's like, and so it suddenly went like, oh, there are these actors who have created these characters that they live in, for many movies, who are not who we really, really like and are really, really funny, but they're also complicated and filled with human foibles,
Yeah. Well, there's a prism with which you can watch this film where he is not the hero of this film, because he, as you said, he is he has an overdeveloped sense of attachment to that bike. As you said, he's overvalued himself in that way, and then he's dismissive of Dottie when she tries to help him a number of times. He's rude to Dottie. He takes the advantage of people's connection with him by shoving them into a room for 3 hours to go over all the different ways he wants to get the bike. It doesn't even get to the point after 3 hours, then runs off, goes to the Alamo, and he is just on his own trying to make this all happen. Then when he sees where his bike is, he sneaks his way onto a studio set and then steals the bike back from a young kid who had gotten the bike, and goes on a crazy chase about this, which of course eventually leads to them making a movie about it. But he is so singularly focused that he can be seen in a negative way. But he does make a call to apologize to Dottie, not necessarily to go out with Dottie, because I think, as you said, he's still a child. So in that way, he even sees girls as like, ew, ick. Yes. And so, you see that, but he is apologizing to her and saying, I was selfish, and he learned a lesson. So there's an arc for Pee Wee Herman that I think works throughout the movie, which is really funny to consider when you look at what happens to him.
Well, it's funny, and I don't know if this is some of the notes that you have, but it's like the script, which is written by Paul Reubens and Phil Hartman, the great late Phil Hartman.
Right.
I know that
and Michael Varhol, three screenwriters for this one. Yeah.
And I know that they went and they got Sid Field's book, which is the classic book on screenwriting. And they're like, oh, so we need a MacGuffin. That's the bike. He loses the bike on page 30. He finds out where it is on page 60. And what I think but the funniest, and this is why I brought it up, is that we've talked before on the Cine-Files of one of the other great screenwriting books, which is Save the Cat, which is where I need to have my character do something good at the beginning of the movie so people like him. And I've already expressed many times on the Cine-Files, I don't quite think that's true. But what I think is hilarious is this movie, they save the cat at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Is at the very end, we go, just in case you thought this guy was a jerk, and just in case he caused all this wreckage on the studio, he's going to save some cats. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with this movie. So let's open the door to the stuff you're bringing up here. Yeah, that's what they did. It's a great story about the script. It was originally going to be based as he originally started writing the script as a remake of Pollyanna. And he was on the Warner Brothers set, and when he was writing the script, he saw how many people had bikes on the Warner Brothers set, and that's what changed his mind about it. So this film is in essence and this is going to be crazy for people to consider, this is in essence a nod to The Bicycle Thieves, the 1948 Italian classic film. It was influenced by that. So so people, you can dismiss a film, but if you don't look at it and analyze it and see where it's coming from, the art of the influence behind it, I think you can miss out on a few things, because that film is about the main characters who have their bikes stolen. The police don't seem to care about it, and none of the friends want to offer much help. So they consult a fortune teller to let them know where the bike is. So that's pretty much lifted from that sequence there when you see the film. And two things here. This is Tim Burton's feature film directorial debut. He had got it because Shelley Duvall, he was screened Frankenweenie. Shelley Duvall showed it to Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee Herman and the producers, about a few minutes into the short, were like, we got to talk to this guy. And Tim says, this is the easiest job I ever got, because they'd offered it to me and I immediately took it, because I wanted to do something feature film wise. And I liked that Paul Reubens knew concretely who Pee Wee Herman was. He knew what Pee Wee Herman would do and would not do in his movie. And it made it a lot easier for me to direct. It made it a lot easier for me to direct around that, to put it together. This is also, as I said, the debut of Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman, we have Paul Reubens to thank for Tim Burton, and we have Paul Reubens to thank for Danny Elfman. it was Paul Reubens, who was a big Oingo Boingo fan and who kind of nudged Tim Burton to go see Oingo Boingo in concert because he wanted him to do the music. Danny Elfman initially turned it down, said he didn't want to do it. He had questions about his ability to score a film. And it wasn't until he got on the phone with Tim Burton, and then by the end of the conversation, on a whim, he said yes. And so we have the great Danny Elfman and the great Tim Burton cutting their teeth, one as a director, one as a composer, on this movie. And I think that's one of those kind of happy accidents where all these incredibly talented people right at the beginning of their careers come together and create a film like this that still endures. And that includes Phil Hartman. This is before he got on SNL, people. This is not Phil Hartman after SNL. This is Phil Hartman before SNL. He goes and does Pee Wee's Playhouse for a year, leaves because he gets the gig at SNL. So that's something to consider in all of this as well. Another talented person connected to the film is the co-screenwriter. So a lot here to consider.
I mean, it's crazy to me, these people that are involved. And what's funny is, like, I'm kind of mentally, it's a terrible thing to do, but ranking how important each of these people are to me. And the odd thing is that probably the least important in terms of my life is probably Paul Reubens. I mean, like, I can't begin to tell you how big a Phil Hartman fan I became when he was on Saturday Night Live and the voices on The Simpsons and fucking News Radio.
Yeah.
I mean, of all the celebrity deaths.
Oh, yeah.
That and probably Robin Williams might be the two most difficult ones for me.
Yep. I would agree with that because one was, a horrible death, a murder from what was clearly a toxic relationship. And the other one is a death from not wanting to confront the horrible things that were happening to him and taking his own life, and possibly not even in his own head when he made that decision. So two incredible comedic geniuses that we lost way too early in their lives, for sure. Yeah, it's excellent points you bring up here. Yeah.
Well, and then you go to Danny Elfman, and it's like Danny Elfman. I remember when I first heard Only a Lad, that album, and I was probably a freshman in high school, so it was probably 82 or 83.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had this experience where you first hear some music and you go, "Oh, that is not for me. I don't even know if that's music." And then you kind of hear it again and you go, "There's something interesting there." And then I obsessively started listening to Oingo Boingo. And it was so funny because it's the darkness and the sickness and the sense of humor of Danny Elfman, and I think Danny Elfman changes movie scores. And it's funny. I remember one of my great teachers in film school really dissed Danny Elfman and said that there was some rumor that he couldn't really write music, and that he would play something and then other people would actually do all the instrumentation because he didn't. And maybe that was true early in his career. Maybe it's not true at all. I don't really know. Right. But I remember it was the one thing that this great teacher I had said that I was like, nope, you don't get it. You are wrong. Danny Elfman is amazing. Because you think of all the incredible movie scores and The Simpsons that we get from Danny Elfman going forward. It's like, and it's both the scores where it's like, that's Danny Elfman. Like you hear, 1 second of the Batman theme and you're like, that's Danny Elfman. And of course, Nightmare Before Christmas and all that. But then there's also scores like the Good Will Hunting score, which are really profound and don't sound like that. Like, I think he's one of the great guys.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you 100%. He is one of the great guys in terms of modern composers, for sure. Let's talk about some of the people who could have been in this movie.
Okay.
First of all, let's go down the cast list real quick. I want to make sure obviously Paul Reubens playing Pee Wee Herman. We'll talk about Paul Reubens in a little bit. As I mentioned, Elizabeth Daily playing Dottie. For those of you who may not know Elizabeth Daily, she does go by E.G. Daily sometimes as well. She became she was a singer in the 1980s. She has songs on soundtracks. She was kind of one of these actresses that would pop up in 1980s films in interesting roles. But she became a voiceover actress, and she is the voice of Buttercup from the Powerpuff Girls, Tommy Pickles from Rugrats, Babe from Babe Pig in the City, and even was Bam Bam in the Fruity Pebbles commercials, and of course, a million other things. Go and check out her resume. A very revered voiceover actress. And we're discussing this, right on the sad heels of Arlene Sorkin passing away yesterday, who was the original voice of Harley Quinn. So, just these very interesting and phenomenal actresses doing voiceover work that have entertained numerous generations of us here in the world. Frances, who is the villain of the film, played by Mark Holton. Diane Salinger plays Simone, the waitress who wants to go to Paris. If you recognize her, she is the wife with Paul Reubens and the mother of Oswald Cobblepot in Batman Returns. Those are those two who are doing that there. Alice Nunn, in her final film role and final acting role, played Marge. And Pee Wee Herman, Paul Reubens, told her before the film even screened at a premiere, he said to her, "You are going to be the star of the film. They're going to talk about your scene forever." And she said that in an interview before she passed away. Ed Hurley, who plays Francis's dad, who comes in for that chewing gum scene and what have you, Mr. Buxton, he is the original Ed McMahon to Jack Parr on The Tonight Show. Yes, he originated, in essence, the sidekick on The Tonight Show that Ed McMahon would make famous when he was doing it with Johnny Carson. So that's what he was really well known for. And the butler, who some of you may recognize if you're deep into professional wrestling, is the Professor Taru Tanaka. And Tanaka was a big part of the WWF back in the early 1980s. He had a title match with Bruno Sammartino. And with Mr. Fuji, he was a 3-time winner of the WWF World Tag Team title. So just even a small part like that. And he turned to acting because wrestling had been kind of hurting his body, fracturing his body, and injuring his body so much that he turned to acting. Was a number of things besides Pee Wee's Big Adventure. And finally, Cassandra Peterson plays the biker mama there in that scene with tequila in the biker bar. That is Elvira / Cassandra Peterson there in that scene as well. But here are people who could have been in the movie. For Francis, for the villain of the film, they wanted Corey Feldman, but Corey Feldman could not do it because he was shooting The Goonies at the same time as the film was going on. And here are the 5 women who auditioned to play Dottie. Lori Loughlin, Laura Dern, Phoebe Cates, Leah Thompson, and Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Wow.
So, I mean, clearly they were looking for someone to play this role, and somehow Elizabeth Daily beat out all these incredibly talented actresses to land the role. So yeah, this wasn't just like, let's grab whoever we can grab,
What's interesting about it is those are all amazing people.
Right.
I don't see anything wrong with E.G. Daly's performance. I think she's good. And what's interesting about her
role, though, man. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, this ain't Shakespeare that she's doing, but like what I think what's interesting about Tim Burton, particularly this early stage of Tim Burton, is it's the goofy childlikeness of, I think she fits well with Pee Wee in a way that I don't know that Laura Dern would have. Right. And I think Laura Dern is incredible, but I don't know that it would have, or Jennifer Jason Leigh. They all have, and this is what we talked about with casting before. You're not, people think you're looking for the best actress or the best actor, but you're not. You're looking for the person who is the best person to do that thing in that scene, and the sort of sweetness and childlikeness of Pee Wee Herman dictates who you're going to have play against him, Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Paul Reubens, Steve. He did recently pass, which has been an influence for us to do the film. Initially, we were going to do it as an episode, as you mentioned earlier, but we are doing it as a live show here. You know that he's a former United States Marine?
I had no idea.
Yes, he was dishonorably discharged after 4 years in the Marine Corps.
After 4 years?
4 years in the Marine Corps. Imagine that. And that's how he got into acting and comedy. It's where he wanted to be. He didn't want to be in the Marines anymore. He just wanted to pursue it. And he left the Marines. He was part of the Groundlings. And that's where you see a lot of these actors who were in the movie were Groundlings people, including Phil Hartman, with him around the same time. I think the actress who plays Simone, Diane Salinger, was also part of the Groundlings at the time. So casting people in that arena here to be a part of this as well. We do see Phil Hartman in the movie. He has a cameo in the film there as one of the reporters at the end with Francis. And we also see Tim Burton in the film. If you're an eagle-eye viewer, he is one of the thugs who confronts Pee Wee in the rain in that noir-esque sequence that Tim Burton directs when Pee Wee has run off after he's delivered his 3-hour talk about his bike there. And we do see Michael Varhol in this as well. He is one of the reporters, or one of the photographers rather, in one of the scenes as well. So everyone getting a little bit of time on the screen. But
can we just say something about the Groundlings? Because they're so important in comedy history. That it's like original Saturday Night Live comes out of Second City largely. You know, with a little bit of, and then you get sort of the influx of SCTV from Canada. But like the next wave of Saturday Night Live characters and great comedians come out of the Groundlings. And it's interesting, like one of the things that I sort of, this is just my take on it, having watched Second City improv and then watched Groundlings stuff, is that it always seemed like Second City was built on scenes, like on really on scene work between the characters. Whereas the Groundlings was really built on creating a wacky character. And Pee Wee Herman is like a perfect example. And if you think about some of those Phil Hartman characters or Jan Hook's characters, or like those where it's like here is this, or it's Pat is like a perfect example of like the character drives the wackiness of the character drives the comedy rather than the interplay of the scene. And so it's just think that like it's a really important moment in comedy history, and Pee Wee is a perfect example of that. Is a character, and it's a character so big that Paul Reubens never, like that is Paul Reubens, that's just it.
You'll always connect him to that character. For sure. For sure. Well, what are some of your favorite sequences in the film, Steve? I mean, there's some interesting adventures that he goes on there at the Alamo, because the fortune teller tells him it's the basement of the Alamo. But even his journey to the Alamo, he has quite an interesting experience with Simone there, and her crazy boyfriend who chases him all around there with a dinosaur bone, and his dealings on the train with that. What you would say is a tramp or hobo, I guess, in the terminology of that time, and all the things he experiences on his way to realizing that there is no basement at the Alamo, under Jan Hooks's tour guide role there. Which, by the way, she improvised every line in the movie that you see her do.
Seriously,
none of that is in the script. Jan Hooks improvised her entire scenes in the movie up until the end of her time on the film.
Oh, that makes it even better. That hurt. So I guess let's start at the Alamo since we're there. The Jan Hooks's. I don't know if you've been on that tour, but I have been on that tour.
Not at the Alamo, but other tours like this, yes. 100%.
Well, I have been on the tour at the Alamo. The Alamo is a fascinating place. Lots of great history there. But like when you go, like, and you know me, I love history. I love learning stuff. But when you go on the tour and they're just like, they're going on. I was on a tour at San Simeon, which is, Hearst Castle, and which is a fascinating place. And the tour guide was killing me. And I'm just sitting there going, shit, this is a 90-minute tour and I can't, you can't get off the ride. So the fact that she improvised that is amazing. And we get to one of the full laugh out loud moments of the movie to me is when he's on the phone. He's like, no, I'm in Texas. Really? The stars at night are big and bright. Everyone joins in. I can remember being in the theater and fucking busting a gut. That moment is so silly and funny. That is one of my favorite moments.
I think I'd have to say that I love that moment, but I love another moment in the Alamo when they're trying to get him to remember. He's like, do you remember anything? Do you remember your bike? Do you remember your name? Do you remember where you are? He's like, no. What do you remember? And he goes, the Alamo. And then that scene broke me when I was watching it yesterday. I laughed. I had to stop it for about 2 or 3 minutes because I was laughing so hard because it comes out of nowhere. And a lot of the comedy that's great in this film completely comes out of nowhere. And simple stuff and bigger stuff. Like when he's in the magic shop, Mario's magic shop, which is Tim Burton's nod to Mario Bava, who was one of his favorite directors. When he pulls out the ear and he goes, what? That scene gets me every time. These little things amidst all the weird humor that happens. I love those moments. So there's just so much to enjoy as you walk through this. But there's also a very sweet heart at the center of this, don't you think, Steve? Like, he does love his bike, but the journeys he goes on, he actually likes the people. And the scene that he has with the convict who was Julio, I think his name, was broken out. The conversations they are hilarious. I don't know how you don't cast Robert Haggis from Welcome Back, Kotter, Epstein. I don't know how you don't cast him in that role. Would have been perfect. But they're back and forth, him dressing up as a woman to help him get away from that situation, and then them falling down through the sky, screaming at each other, holding on to each other. It's such funny, weird sequences that happen in this movie that just works so well. But you can tell he has a genuine love and affection for everybody he comes in contact with in the film on his adventures.
I think that's totally true. And what I think, we did our live show on 80s comedies, whenever that was. And one of the things I think we talked about then, and it definitely applies to this movie, is we don't spend a lot of time being silly in movies today.
Right.
Like, of course we know this is silly. That's the point. We're being really silly. I mean, like, and the thing I was thinking about, I think this came up when we talked about Beverly Hills Cop, is there's the great Chuck Jones, the animator, his book, Chuck Amok. And one of the things that he said that struck me so strongly is that a lot of the comedy is based on comic villains, and Daffy Duck being a comic villain. Like he is a selfish, mean, will betray people to get whatever he wants, and then he's continually getting his comeuppance. Same with Wile E. Coyote. Whereas Bugs Bunny is a comic hero, and that there aren't as many comic heroes. The Tramp is one. Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop is one, and so is Pee Wee Herman. That Pee Wee Herman is that when he's with the convict, and then Pee Wee Herman comes up with the beard and the dress and the whole thing, it's like that's full Bugs Bunny. Like that is a Bugs Bunny move.
Yes.
And the thing is you go like, oh, and again, it goes to the childlike sort of, they don't see the real problems that are coming their way. They just figure they can get out of everything. And Pee Wee, in fact, can. And watching him between, like, that's a moment where it's like that. Yeah. And fucking Tequila, man. Tequila is a spectacular. That is a moment of, you could see the Groundlings, which is like, I'm going to do something completely insane, and I'm going to commit 100% to it, and that is how I'm going to win. But the moment he's in those shoes up on toes, man.
Well, you have to build to that moment, right, Steve? I'm sure you can speak about this better than I can. As a screenwriter, you've got to build to that moment. You got to earn that scene in the biker bar by having him go through all these adventures and survive and get out of it, and have that half man, half child approach to the world work to his benefit a majority of the time in all of these adventures he goes on, so that by the time he walks in that bar, there is a real kind of desperation that he's so close to getting his bike that he is yelling at bikers. He's so unaware that he's yelling at bikers to be quiet. A little bit of privilege there, thinking that he can tell them to shut up.
He's a child.
Yeah,
he's a child.
Exactly. And so he tries to get out of the situation. And then, they're thinking of ways to kill him. And then Cassandra Peterson comes in, and then he says one last request, which, who gives you a last request? And then randomly he borrows the shoes from one of the people cleaning the tables there who works in the thing, and it works out. And by the way, those are those are Paul Reubens' actual shoes that he had borrowed off the guy and used. And right out of nowhere, the tequila moment, and it 100% works. And story-wise, it works because these are ruffians who are in the bar who claim they own the bar. You jumping up on the second level of the bar, shattering shit and throwing glasses and throwing beer bottles, which is their kind of way of having a good time. It makes sense that you might win them over because you do that. So not only is the sequence funny, it makes sense story-wise, because in the first verse, they're not into it, the bikers. It isn't until he jumps to the second bar and starts throwing stuff on the ground and shattering it that they come around, and that makes sense for you. And then you button that scene with him taking off on the bike and running through the billboard and being taken to the hospital with this biker escort. Genius. Well,
and then you see so much. You can see the beginnings of Tim Burton.
Yes, right.
I don't think this is like Reservoir Dogs where you go, there's Tarantino fully formed. I don't think it's that. But after he goes to the hospital, he has the dream with the crazy doctors, and that's
clowns.
all Tim. Yeah, that's all Tim Burton.
That's all Beetlejuice. That's all
totally Beetlejuice.
Right? Yeah. The angled doorways that are kind of off.
Yep.
All of that is totally Beetlejuice. But also, Steve, earlier in the film when his bike gets stolen, his reaction to it all is something you'd see in Vertigo, a very Hitchcock influenced sequence. where all the bikes and stuff spinning around him and all that, and him in shadow, all of that works so well. So it's a great mixture of old movie influence along with how can I say this, a unique perspective in filmmaking that Tim Burton is going to show us in the years afterwards in all his projects after that. One thing I do want to say about the large Marge sequence, that story that she tells in the truck or in the semi, and then later with the bar patron stuff, which is a great thing that you find out she's a ghost and it's her anniversary. That's like just so perfect. It is based on a song called Phantom 309 from 1967. Country music singer Red Sovine released it as a single. That was a pretty big hit at the time. It was number 9 on the Billboard Country Music Chart. And the lyrics are essentially the plot of what happens at the truck stop after Large Marge drops off Pee Wee. And then Tom Waits did a remake of this song in the 1970s that probably people know more. But in essence, the story of the song is the entire sequence that Pee Wee goes through. So even something random like that being put into a film like this still works because of the comedic geniuses who are writing the script and making it work overall.
Well, let's talk a bit about Large Marge.
Let's talk
because so first of all, her performance is fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, it's just and the largeness of her, the way they film it, and the seriousness of her, and just like you walk into this space in the mist, and what makes that jump scare so good, is that you can't imagine in the movie that you've been watching so far that anything is going to scare you like that.
Right.
And it scared the crap out of me, and it is the perfect, maybe more than any other movie, because I'm not a horror movie guy, of having the moment of being totally caught off guard and then laughing hysterically because it was so damned, because even though it is a genuine jump scare, at least to me, but it's so silly when you realize what you just saw, like she just turned into claymation and then you get off the truck. It's just so bizarre.
It is. And this is the final thing that she did, as I mentioned earlier before she passed away. She passed away from a heart attack in her apartment in West Hollywood, California. Only 60 years old, Steve. Only 60 years old. But she'd been in things like Wild Wild West, Ironside, Petticoat Junction, Airport 1975, Johnny Get His Gun. She had a small part as Mrs. Callahan in Brian De Palma's The Fury in 1978, and was working with Patricia Percy and Joseph Cotton, and was in Delusion from 1980, and was the maid in Mommy Dearest. A lot of people might forget the Large Marge was the maid in Mommy Dearest. So yeah, just a fantastic career here for her. And she became a bit of a cult actress until she passed away 3 years later after the film came out. So just incredible stuff. And the sequence there works so well because of how she plays it. And then when he turns to see the claymation and the screaming, all of that, it works so well because we just had an animated sequence with all these animals where we just see Pee Wee's animated eyes looking left and right. And he turns on the light and all those animals are next to him. And then boom, it's dark again for an effect. And then we see her coming out of the mist. So it's just so smart. These sequences in the film, they work so well. They don't take you away from the overall narrative of the film because you've dialed into the charm and the humor of Paul Reubens as Pee Wee Herman to take you through these sequences. So yeah.
Well, and I'll say this: Tim Burton is not on my list of favorite directors. Okay. I absolutely love him for some of the movies.
Yes, right.
And I am almost always interested and curious about what he's going to do. But the movies don't always work for me. But what I do love, and what I think was so important about this, in particular, this movie, Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands, is I don't need to worry about realism. I don't need to worry about, I can take you to a silly place like him. I have no idea if the animated eyes sequence was in the original script. Because it so feels like it, because Tim Burton's an animator. It so feels like a Tim Burton. No, we can go to this completely ridiculous place and trust me that I'm going to make it worth it. And when Tim Burton's movies work, they work really, really well. And you instantly know you're in a Tim Burton movie right away,
Right. Well, again, the coming together of these young artists at the right time and having a canvas where they could show you what they can do. They had the license to show you what they could do. There's so many reasons this film should have failed, but it succeeded because people brought their talent to bear and had a feeling they could create what they wanted to create and make it work. And it did. And it also shows you that there is a taste for this with the right audiences, if you can get it right. And that audiences are always willing to try new things if you can get through to them. And this is one of the most unusual films, even though, it's funny, Steve, it has the same, it's very much a 1980s film, yet it's very much not a 1980s film and works so well in both of those arenas when you're looking at the film and judging it. I do want to say, we got a Streamlab that came through here from Wiley Todd. What's up, Wiley? Good to see you.
Thank you, Wiley.
He said, quick question. Would you guys ever do another Beatles film? I'm currently going through the Beatles entirely for the first time in my life. Oh my God, congratulations. Going through the albums and movies, would love more conversation on them. Thanks. Well, we did do Hard Day's Night, right? And we did it with Scott. Is that correct? We did it with Scott.
We did.
We did it with Scott. So that's when we did. Scott, Steve, and I reviewed Get Back on my channel, on the Outlaw Nation channel.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
If you want to see that review, you can just type in that and find it on the Outlaw Nation Wiley, which I know you're a subscriber to. But yeah, I would love to do either Help or Yellow Submarine as an interesting experiment down the road for sure. Because I don't think Help is as bad as people think, and I don't think Yellow Submarine is as bad as people think. So I'd be open for it if Steve would be open.
Look, I love the Beatles, and I haven't seen Help in a really, really long time. I watched Yellow Submarine with Jax maybe 3 years ago. It is really interesting. It is. Well, I mean, what's funny is, I don't mean that in a negative way.
Right.
I mean that in like, what a weird movie. And it's really weird that like I watched it as a kid a ton and didn't see it as weird. It was just what it was. And it's funny that you bring up, Wiley, that you bring up that when we're talking about this movie, because again, the Beatles are silly. They have senses of humor and they enjoy their silliness. So I would totally do it. I actually think maybe they would make great live shows rather than kind of going moment through moment, because we could just talk about the joy of the songs and all that kind of stuff. And I know for a damn certainty that Scott Mance would kill us if we did a Beatles movie without him. There would be genuine hurt feelings there. So we just have to keep that in mind.
I hate you both. You're dead to me.
Yeah, no, you're not. I love you, but I'm angry. But
put me on the show. But yeah, I think Help would be an interesting live show. Although I don't know how many people would tune in, to be honest with you. But we could explore it. I think Yellow Submarine could be a fun Cine-Files After Dark. Like Steve and I getting a little drunk, maybe making this episode just for our patrons at a certain level and above. And we just sit here and talk about the absolute weirdness of Yellow Submarine and try to find symbolism and meaning and whatever might be coursing through this movie. That could be a fun thing to explore down the road for us, for sure. So I'd be down for that. So all right, let's see. So let's talk about Paul. Well, let me say this: the movie was made for $7 million. That's Pee Wee's Big Adventure. It ended up grossing between $40 and $45 million, depending on who you talk to here. So pretty good profit for a $7 million film, Steve, for sure. More than 2.5 times, that's for sure. But in the end, we should move over to talk about Pee Wee Herman, Paul Reubens. What are your thoughts on Paul Reubens? What is your feeling about him in this role and how he brings to life this character that makes it work in a film like this?
Can I ask you a question first?
Sure.
Did you, because you were just slightly younger than me, a few years, did you watch Pee Wee's Playhouse?
I am 35 years old. I did watch Pee Wee's Playhouse. Yes, I did.
See, I didn't, and I think that because I was in high school, and I'm not sure when Pee Wee's Playhouse premiered, but
it was right after the movie. It was right after.
Okay,
the movie. CBS.
So like I probably watched.
Yeah.
Because I think for people who grew up with Pee Wee's Playhouse, and you know, so like I know Mike Vogel, and you know they're all, you know, a few years younger than us.
Yes.
Like
Right.
Pee Wee is huge.
Oh,
For
yeah.
me, a little less, because for me the biggest point was this movie. Of course, I watched Big Top Pee Wee, but it's not a terribly good movie.
Yeah.
And would see him, and whenever he popped up, it was always fun. But in the end, it was this character. But I didn't spend as much time with him because I didn't grow up watching Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Right. Oh, no, I think for me it was massive in my life because I did watch Pee Wee's Playhouse after this movie, and I was right around that age where I could like kind of still indulge myself a little bit in getting up on a Saturday morning and watching it over my Cheerios or whatever, because I think that's
right
when it was on Saturdays. I think 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning you could sit and watch, and so many incredible actors I got exposed to without knowing I was being exposed to them.
Right.
When I was watching Pee Wee's Playhouse, Lawrence Fishburne in there, Phil Hartman in there, S. Epitha Merkerson, who some of you Law and Order people may know. But here's two things that I discovered. Here's two people that I discovered who were production assistants on Pee Wee's Playhouse that I did not know were production assistants on Pee Wee's Playhouse. John Singleton, of all people, was a production assistant.
So that's how he knows Lawrence Fishburne.
Exactly. 3 or 4 years later, he does Boys in the Hood. So he was right at the tail end of Pee Wee's Playhouse, because it only ran, I think, from 86 to 89. And Rob Zombie, of all people, was a part of Pee Wee's Playhouse, which I think makes all the sense in the world.
Totally.
Right? When you look at some of the horror influences of Tim Burton on the Pee Wee's Big Adventure, but then how Paul Reubens carried some of that forward into Pee Wee's Playhouse. So Rob Zombie, an unusual horror movie director to say the least, may be influenced by some of the stuff that he had experienced doing there on Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Well, and I think people underestimate, particularly today. I know I've said this before, but that when we grew up, cartoons and kid stuff was dark. You know, it was very violent. It was very cruel frequently, particularly if you get, you know, Wile E. Coyote or battles between Popeye and Bluto or whatever. It got into some stuff, you know, and is that today that's not really very true. But like and Disney stories are dark. Right. And like there is an edge to Pee Wee. And from the Pee Wee's Playhouse I did watch, which isn't a ton, that didn't go away. Like it didn't just become sweet and loving. It was like, no, there was some stuff in there. Yeah. And because you can't lie to kids. Like you can tell them, look, everything is great and everyone resolves all their conflicts and there's but no, life is actually shitty and hard sometimes. Yeah. And people can be mean or mean-spirited, and blowing stuff up can be fun. And like, you know, like that, like, and I think Pee Wee is a part of that. Yeah. That worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. I like the message in the movie through Pee Wee, right? Like at the beginning, certainly it's not great that he's obsessed with this bike, but it means something to him. So he's going to find a way to get it no matter what it takes, right? He has a goal that he wants to achieve and he's working hard to get it. Later, when he has the scene, and look, you can take the microcosm of stuff. When he gets up in the morning, he gets up happy to be alive, happy to enjoy the world. He gets up, he lifts some weights for about 3 seconds and plays with his toys. So he, you know, kind of dials into the joy of life, has the breakfast made for him, comes down the pole like Batman and changes from pajamas into his suit, and then eats a little bit and then rolls on throughout his day and goes to the places where he wants to go and enjoy himself and have fun in his life. But later on, after the bike is stolen, when he goes on this journey, he is learning lessons from everybody he comes in contact with. And then he has this wonderful moment with Simone where he's sitting there telling her, look, your dreams aren't going to come find you. You've got to go out and make it happen. You've got to go and pursue the things you love. And it's such a great scene between him and Diane Salinger, even with the sexual innuendo that is bubbling, that is, you know, the boyfriend is listening and hearing something completely different. It's still great to hear him talk about her big butt and getting through her big butt and her saying how she's never had it put to her quite that way. All of that works still as an inspirational scene. And then later we see that she is going off to pursue her dreams, right when his dreams look like they're about to shatter with his bike after the Alamo situation. So it's such an interesting thing to see.
By the way, those gags, those double entendres are the perfect kid-friendly double entendres.
Yes.
Because if you're old enough to understand the joke, it's fine. And if you're not old enough to understand the joke, the scene works perfectly well. By the way, one thing we haven't talked about is the James Brolin Morgan Fairchild of it all.
Yes, we should talk about that.
I think, you know what movie I think inspired them, and I have no evidence for this, although I'm 100% sure that it's true, is Blazing Saddles. Because Blazing Saddles ends up in a big action sequence at the movie studio in a big chase, and then ends up watching the movie of the movie with the actors of the movie, you know, like, and by the way, one undersung moment of Paul Reubens' true acting ability is him playing the world's worst, you know, small part in his own movie and having his voice dubbed. It is perfect bad acting.
Well, it's ironic because his first film role was in that Cheech and Chong movie as a hotel front desk receptionist.
Oh, is it? Oh, I had no idea.
So to do it again here in a different format, in a different hotel, because clearly it's a different outfit. The looks into the two looks into the camera, fucking genius. Just that's how you do it. He's so stiff and then looks and then moves. Just it's so smart at how he played that so well, especially when you've got to do it against James Brolin, who loves chewing up the scenery, and Morgan Fairchild, who was, you know, just Morgan Fairchild.
Yeah, I miss having a Morgan Fairchild show up on my episode of The Love Boat or whatever.
Her and the Lander sisters, man, you can never go wrong with the Lander sisters and Morgan Fairchild in your show. But yeah, and obviously that influenced what we saw later in Austin Powers, when you had Danny DeVito and Tom Cruise and Gwyneth Paltrow playing Austin Powers and Dr. Evil, and was it Heather Graham in that one? I forget.
I don't remember.
But
Heather Graham, yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question on a different topic just you brought up? Have you watched a Cheech and Chong movie as an adult or in a long time?
I don't think I've watched it as an adult. I mean, I guess technically I was over 18 when I watched a couple of those. But nothing recently. No.
Because I watched Up in Smoke because it was like on Showtime. So whenever it was on, I just watched it again. I watched it over and over again. I listened to the Cheech and Chong album with the whole Dave joke. And there was this song, and I can't remember what the song is, but it was hilarious. And I have not watched a Cheech and Chong movie in 30 years, you know, and now I'm suddenly going, would that hold up? Would that be a good thing?
The Cine-Files After Dark may have a second episode to do with the Cheech and Chong Up in Smoke movie for sure. Let's see. We had one super chat that came through. Vincent Zawada saying, Ed Wood future episode. Love the show. Steve, Ed Wood, would you consider that one? I don't know.
I saw it once in the theater. I liked it. I didn't love it as much as everyone else. This also was, as I've said before, when I was in film school, where I was probably my most negative about movies. I remember Martin Landau being amazing.
Yes.
I mean, probably my favorite Tim Burton movie is still Beetlejuice. What about you? What's your feeling on Ed Wood?
I mean, I think I would consider it because I think it's a nice commentary on Hollywood. It certainly features a fantastic performance from Johnny Depp and Martin Landau. And so I would consider it because I think there's a niche factor to this movie and a kitsch factor to this movie that would be fun to explore. Plus one of the greatest Orson Welles scenes you're ever going to see in that diner scene with him and Ed Wood. I think D'Onofrio plays him. So good. So yeah, I would absolutely consider. Plus it's a black and white movie.
Yeah. So
there's something to comment on the artistry of choosing to go black and white with that. So yeah, I'd be up for it down the road. But yeah, we haven't done any. Is this our first Tim Burton film?
This is our first Tim Burton film. Yeah.
We didn't do 1989's Batman. We haven't done that one. I thought
no, we you don't remember this exchange?
I don't remember this exchange. Tell me, my COVID brain. Tell me what do we had my son's half brother because Jax is adopted over, and I was watching it with them because something had just happened that brought it up, and I don't remember why. Oh, because we were gonna go see The Flash. And so I wanted them to know who Michael Keaton was. We got 30 minutes in, they hated it, and I didn't particularly like it either. Wow, so this is the first Tim Burton film.
Yeah,
we need to rectify that, Steve. Beetlejuice. I'm happy to do Beetlejuice anytime you want to do Beetlejuice. I love that movie, so I might be open to that very very soon whenever we want to do it, brother. for sure.
So we got a lot of plans. We got a Cheech and Chong After Dark. We got what was the other one you said we're going to do after? Oh, Yellow Submarine.
Yeah,
Yellow Submarine, and now we got Beetlejuice. It's the schedule. It's just filling up.
I love that. We'll have to run it by the advisory council and see what they say when we meet with them next week for sure. Two things to tell you: 10 to 12 bikes were used as Pee Wee's bike in the movie. They were from a bike shop in Norwalk. Does that sound right to you? California, Norwalk?
Yeah,
Does that sound
sure.
right to you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone sold the original bike a few years ago. They were looking to get maybe $15,000. They got $36,000 in an auction for the bike. So that tells you the level of love people have. And here's something that I did not know about the movie. And of course, some of these facts I certainly did not know, but Gene Siskel hated this movie. Hated the movie. He put it on his top 10 worst films of 1985. Roger Ebert refused to watch the movie until 1987. So, your revered critics sometimes, even they were like, I am not going to waste my time watching a film and doing a review of it. It's not for me. So Ebert, though, did like the movie and understood why people might enjoy it and did think it was a good comedy. So Siskel did not enjoy the film when it first came out and wrote a scathing review of it. I think it's at 85 or 88% on Rotten Tomatoes with the old reviews being factored in. But there were some reviews that were not positive about the movie overall. But certainly the fact that it made $40 to $45 million on its run lets you know that the audiences were behind it for sure. And sadly, the sequel wasn't as good, although it did feature the feature film debut of Benicio del Toro in the movie as Wolf Boy or whatever. And I did not see Pee Wee's Big Holiday, which was the 2016 Netflix film. So, but there are some great Pee Wee Herman scenes if you want to watch some of the stuff he would do on The Tonight Show or on Jimmy Kimmel's show, or the one short SNL digital short he did all these years later, going back to SNL, because he was rejected by SNL, which is why he created Pee Wee Herman and started.
I didn't know that.
Show. Yes, he did not get accepted by SNL, and that's what influenced him to create a one-man show around the Pee Wee Herman show, which he did around town in LA, which is what eventually got him into do Pee Wee's Big Adventure. So all these years later, he went back and did an SNL digital short with Andy Samberg, and if you guys haven't watched that, that is funny as hell. And it goes in an R direction that I think is just genius in how they use the humor. Anderson Cooper's in it in the cameo. Yeah, it's a very weird where him and Pee Wee Herman and Andy Samberg start taking shots on New Year's Eve, and they end up in the craziest places. So it's well worth your watch for sure. Steve, anything more we need to discuss on this movie? Anything more we need to say about Paul Reubens or Pee Wee Herman or the movie itself?
I think he is a unique human, who uniquely did the thing that he did. And there is some compromise. There's some controversy about him. I don't know if that's the thing you want to get into.
We should address that for sure. Some people responded on our Facebook post, Steve, and said they didn't want to support pedophilia or child predators and whatever. And certainly Steve and I had a conversation about when we were considering doing this as an episode, some of the things that popped up on Paul Reubens' second arrest. But I don't know. It's weird because when you see the level and outpouring of love and genuine affection people had for Paul Reubens and his explanation for those accusations that he did later, although it may be up to you to decide how much you believe his explanations for that, it certainly is something that does tarnish his legacy. Both of those arrests tarnish his legacy for sure. And we cannot leave out Danny Elfman, who is dealing with his own accusations recently of sexual harassment and settlements from years past of him assaulting a woman, her accusing him of assaulting her and him not paying the money that he had said he was going to pay her. So, just some stuff around Tim Burton and his universe. Certainly Johnny Depp, who was in a number of Tim Burton films, and the stuff that he's dealt with for sure. So, yeah, just what can you say? I don't know.
I've been thinking about how to talk about this kind of stuff because it's really hard. It's really hard. And so first of all, obviously, and we should say right from the outset that, a child predator or pedophilia, these are horrible, horrible, terrible crimes. And I mean,
100%.
frankly, I know 2 people who are the victims of this kind of thing. Oof. And have had conversations with them, and this is horrible, horrible shit.
Yes.
The first arrest of Paul Reubens is not for that.
No.
The first arrest, look, pornography exists all over the place right now. You can get it wherever you want. But there was a time where people went to movie theaters.
Yes.
And as I remember when we did Taxi Driver, and like they go to those movie theaters.
Yes. I thought you were going in a different direction, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Did you get scared? How am I?
A little bit.
This is a difficult line to walk, and I'm going to try to do my best to walk it.
Yes, sir.
Where like dudes went to movie theaters and did things there, and that was a thing. Yep. I don't necessarily have a problem with people looking at pornography as long as people have consent. Yeah. And my understanding is that he was just a guy at a porn place who
he was.
Yeah. And so like that to me that wasn't involving children. That wasn't involving, it was himself, and like, it seems gross to me, but whatever. I don't care that much.
Yeah.
The other one, I don't know the truth. Like, I don't know. Like, he says he has this large collection of a whole bunch of weird stuff that he didn't have. It was pictures from that were old, that were antiques. And if he in fact did anything with children or used modern pictures of children or supported people who were doing those kinds of things
or underage,
fucked up, game over. Yeah, that's it.
100%. Yeah.
But if he had, I know people that have collections of weird shit, including weird erotic shit, and if you're in, and it's very clear, there's no question in my mind that Paul Reubens was into weird stuff.
Probably.
He was weird, and just collecting weird stuff isn't necessarily so terrible. It's in particularly if it's old stuff, like these kids, like the picture that he had, it was like of 2 boys or something, was from a long time ago. So I will tell now a personal story that is what I was thinking of. So it has nothing to do with child pornography of any kind, but this is the story. My grandmother was living the jet set life back in the 50s and 60s and traveled to Africa and Asia and all those places and brought back stuff. When you walked into her house when I was a kid, where in the entryway where you would think there would be like a nice Persian rug, she had a zebra skin rug, a dead zebra.
Whoa.
And it was, a rug, and that's just like someone would have a bear skin rug or some other skin rug. She had a zebra skin rug.
Right.
She also had, what she had bought in Japan, a statue of a Japanese fisherman that I absolutely loved. And every time I was in her house, I would pick it up and look at it because I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
Right.
And it was carved out of ivory. Oof. And this is the thing, is that I am disgusted by the hunting and poaching of elephants for their ivory. It is absolutely terrible. We've hunted all these animals to extinction. And yet I love that statue.
Yeah.
And this is it. This is the statue of
a
Japanese fisherman that my grandmother had that's carved out of ivory.
Okay.
Now, today, this would be a crime.
Yes.
My grandmother already had it. She had bought it 70 years ago or something. Yeah. And now I have it. And it's like, how am I supposed to feel? How should one feel about that object?
Right.
Like am I supporting the killing of elephants by having that on my mantle? Or am I holding an object that I think is really beautiful? I still love this little statue and as a memory of my grandmother and as of history and as of a thing that doesn't exist. And I don't have an answer to the question. Right. But I was thinking about it in terms of the Paul Reubens thing. Is there all sorts of, there are people that collect Nazi weapons and guns. There's people that collect torture devices. There's people that collect all sorts of weird shit that is connected to evil practices of a long time ago. That doesn't necessarily mean me owning this certainly doesn't mean I believe in killing elephants.
Right.
So I don't know. That's why I say I don't know what the truth of Paul Reubens is. And I was trying to think of a way to get my head about it. And I'll go back to the first thing I said was if he was actually actively involved in child pornography or pedophilia in some way, fuck that guy. That is one of the most terrible things. But if he was collecting a whole bunch of different stuff and that was one of the things in the collection, I don't necessarily feel the same way about it. That's how I've tried to get my head around it.
I think that's fair. You know, there's interviews you can read. There's research you all can do if you want to figure out where you land on this. For me, it was a bit unsettling the first time I started looking into this kind of stuff, and then later when I read more stuff, it's a lot. It's very, how can I say this? It's very gray. It's kind of fuzzy about what the intentions were here, how this was exposed, and what he actually had. And so, because there's still a lot of questions about it, I think for me, I couldn't fall on one side of this issue or another because I don't have enough information about it. But I will say and reiterate what Steve said. However, if he did have child pornography or underage pictures of naked teenagers, that is the bridge too far, and that is absolutely abhorrent and should not happen. Whether it's artistic or not, I don't care about shadows and lighting if the whole point of you having it is to sexually turn you on. That isn't the point that you should be having something like that for. So I think that's where I would come down on this whole situation for sure. So yeah, but we felt we should address it, which I'm glad Steve brought up, because we want to be fair to that, as we do on the Cine-Files when we talk about anybody who might be difficult for us or had done difficult things in the past. All right, there are no more Streamlabs or SuperChat. Steve, I don't think I have anything more to say about the movie other than it still holds up. It's still a lot of fun. And it features some wonderful performances, some great writing, some great comedy, and some nice life lessons about how you should appreciate the people around you rather than just become so obsessed with an animate object. Any final words on this?
No, I think, like I hate ending on a bit of a bummer, which I feel like we did.
Okay.
But I also feel like, that this goes into this thing we talked about for a long time now and it goes to what Kim Masters said a long time ago when we had her on the show, was her feeling is you don't take the art off the walls. And it's that we can talk about these issues with Paul Reubens, we could talk about issues with Danny Elfman, and I can still like Oingo Boingo, and I can still enjoy watching this movie. But what we shouldn't do is hide those negative things or try to push them under the rug, pretend they don't exist. I don't think that's the right thing either. So, my final feelings is that this is a unique movie that has a wonderful feeling of childlikeness and silliness, and that it was very, very fun to revisit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there you go. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this live episode of the Cine-Files, aka the Cine-Files Live, where we dived into 1985's Pee Wee's Big Adventure, a film that was successful back then, and I think, in my personal opinion, a film that still holds up now in 2023 in terms of the comedy and the overall joy and the innocence in this film here, and how it approaches the world. And certainly a film, considering how much craziness there is in the world, it might be a much needed tonic for any of you who have not revisited in quite some time, and maybe our show influences you to do so. We shall see. All right, Steve, what final things do we have to tell them before we wrap up, my friend?
I'm at SR Morris. You're at the Rocha Says. We are at the Cine_Files on Twitter, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. Of course, there's all the places to subscribe. I just got an email saying that Stitcher no longer exists, so you can't subscribe there anymore, but you still can with Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts, where we'd love your reviews. And of course, patreon.com/the Cine-Files, where we've already talked about all the great things that are going on there. And if you want to buy or stream Pee Wee's Big Adventure, along with every other movie we've ever reviewed, my mouth is getting tired out, you could do it at cinephiles.net.
All right, there you go. Well, thank you all so much for joining us again. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you next time on another brand new episode of the Cine-Files Live. For my partner, Steve Morris, I'm John Rocha. Take care. Be well.